The late afternoon sun bathed the tall glass building of the Roland Financial Group in a golden hue. It shimmered like a jewel against the skyline as employees in sharp suits hurried out, their shoes clicking on the pavement. Please like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this. At the top of the steps, Kelvin Rowland, the billionaire CEO of the company, stepped out, his mind buried in the numbers of a deal he was closing. His eyes, cold and piercing blue, scanned the crowd without really seeing. But suddenly a voice rose, young, loud and shaking with something raw. You're Kelvin Rowland, aren't you? The question stopped Kelvin in his tracks. He turned sharply, scanning for the source. Standing on the sidewalk was a thin, scruffy boy no older than 12. His clothes were faded, his sneakers torn, and his face carried the weary look of someone who had seen too much for his age. But it was his eyes, dark brown, fierce and unwavering, that froze Kelvin in place. Before Kelvin could say a word, the boy clenched his fists and shouted, "My mom said you're my dad!" Gasps echoed around them as passers-by slowed to watch. Kelvin's personal assistant, Charles, stepped closer, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Even the security guards hesitated. Kelvin stared at the boy, stunned. The statement had thrown him off balance, and he didn't like that feeling. After a pause, he frowned and replied, his voice cool and dismissive. "I don't know who you are, and I certainly don't know your mother." But the boy didn't flinch. His lower lip trembled, but his eyes didn't move. "You're lying," he said. "She told me the truth. You left us." Something flickered in Kelvin's chest, but he pushed it away. Kelvin's gaze hardened, but deep inside, something cracked. The boy's words, sharp and full of pain, echoed louder than the city noise around them. People had stopped walking, forming a loose circle as if watching a scene from a movie. Charles glanced nervously at Kelvin, waiting for instructions, but the billionaire didn't move. "You don't even remember her, do you?" the boy asked quietly, his voice trembling. "My mom, her name is Eliza Dawson." That name hit Kelvin like a punch to the chest. Eliza Dawson. He hadn't heard that name in almost 10 years. For a moment, the world faded. The traffic, the people, the glass tower behind him. In its place, he saw a memory. A girl with soft laughter, kind eyes, and a fierce heart. The girl who once believed in him when he was nothing. The girl who vanished without a word. Kelvin's breath hitched, but he masked it with a sneer. "This conversation is over," he muttered. He turned to leave, but before he could take a full step, the boy rushed forward and grabbed the sleeve of his suit. "Please," the boy's voice cracked, raw and pleading. "Please don't walk away from me again." Kelvin froze. It wasn't the tug on his sleeve that stopped him, it was those words. They struck a chord so deep he almost staggered. The boy's voice, filled with pain and hope, clung to the corners of his mind. That night, back in his penthouse, Kelvin sat in silence. The city lights stretched below him like stars, but he wasn't seeing them. He was hearing that name again, Eliza Dawson. She hadn't crossed his thoughts in years. But now, she was back, not in memory, but in the eyes of a boy claiming to be his son. Kelvin Rowland was a man who prided himself on control. He controlled deals, meetings, markets, even people. But tonight, control had slipped. He sat behind his desk in the penthouse office, the lights dimmed, a glass of untouched scotch in his hand. Outside, the skyline sparkled. Inside, his world was unraveling. Eliza Dawson. He hadn't heard her name since the day she disappeared. No goodbye. No closure. Just gone. He had convinced himself she was like the others, after his money, his name. But now, a boy with her eyes had appeared at his feet, full of anger and heartbreak. Kelvin leaned forward, pressing a button on his desk. "Charles," he said calmly, though his heart thundered. "I need everything you can find on Eliza Dawson. Where she is. What happened to her. Everything." Charles didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." By sunrise, a file sat on Kelvin's desk. He opened it with a shaky hand, bracing for answers. And what he found shattered him. Eliza hadn't run off to some luxurious life. She lived in a rundown apartment on the city's east side. She worked 2 jobs, waitressing by day, cleaning hotel rooms by night. No social media, no friends, no family, just her and a boy named Liam Dawson. No father listed on the birth certificate. Kelvin's hand tightened around the folder. This didn't make sense. Eliza had once loved him, deeply, fiercely, and he had loved her, or thought he did until she vanished. He leaned back in his chair, memories flooding in. Nights they spent dreaming of a future, mornings filled with laughter, promises made under streetlights, and then silence, pain. For the first time in years, Kelvin felt uncertain. He needed answers, and only one person could give them. The sun was setting by the time Kelvin pulled up in front of the small apartment building. His sleek black car looked completely out of place against the cracked pavement and peeling paint. The neighborhood was nothing like the world he knew. There were no doormen, no security gates, no manicured hedges. Just rusted railings, noisy neighbors, and the smell of frying oil drifting from nearby windows. But none of that mattered. Not tonight. Kelvin climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, his polished shoes echoing against the worn-out steps. He stopped in front of apartment 2B. His jaw clenched as he raised his fist and knocked. A moment later, the door creaked open, and there she was, Eliza Dawson, the woman who had haunted his memories for nearly a decade. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands falling around her face. She looked tired, exhausted even, but her eyes, they were the same. That piercing blue he used to get lost in. Her body went still the second she saw him. "Kelvin!" she whispered, barely audible. Kelvin's voice caught, but he managed. "We need to talk." Eliza's hand tightened on the edge of the door. Her posture changed instantly from shock to guarded. "There's nothing to talk about," she said firmly. "Don't lie to me," he snapped, the emotion bubbling to the surface. "Not after today." Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't respond. "A boy came to my office," Kelvin continued. "He said you told him I'm his father." That flicker of panic in her eyes, he saw it. That was all the confirmation he needed. "Eliza," he said, stepping forward, "tell me the truth." Her jaw clenched. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "You don't get to ask me that." Kelvin's eyes narrowed. "The hell I don't," he said, his voice low but intense. "If he's my son, if Liam is my son, you've kept him from me for 8 years. Eliza swallowed hard, but her silence spoke louder than any denial. Her shoulders trembled slightly, though she stood her ground. "Answer me," Kelvin demanded, his voice rising with frustration. "I have a right to know." She closed her eyes for a brief second, then lifted her chin. "You were never supposed to find out." Kelvin stepped back, stunned. "What did you just say?" Eliza opened her eyes, filled with pain. "You were never supposed to care," she said, her voice breaking. His breath caught. "You think I wouldn't have cared?" His voice softened, but his hands were shaking. "You think I wouldn't have come looking if I knew?" Eliza shook her head slowly. "You didn't come looking, Kelvin. Not once." The words stabbed into his chest. He had convinced himself she'd left by choice, that she had found someone else, that she moved on. But now, hearing the truth in her voice, doubt spread like wildfire. "I thought you left me," he said, his voice rough. "I thought you chose someone else." Eliza took a step back, blinking hard. "That's what they wanted you to believe." Kelvin went still. "Who?" She met his eyes, and for the first time that night he saw it, the deep buried pain. "Your family, Kelvin. Your mother." The name hit him like ice water. "That's not possible." "Is it?" Eliza asked quietly. "Then tell me, why didn't you ever question why I left? Why you never heard from me again?" Kelvin couldn't answer. His world, everything he believed, was beginning to unravel. Kelvin's fists clenched at his sides. The idea that his mother, Victoria Rowland, had something to do with Eliza's disappearance felt unthinkable. Yet, Eliza stood there, not accusing, but explaining, like someone who had carried the burden alone for too long. He took a step forward, his voice shaking. "What did she do, Eliza?" Eliza's lips parted, her voice barely more than a whisper. "She came to see me before I disappeared." Kelvin's brows furrowed. "What?" "She told me I wasn't good enough for you, that I was a distraction, a liability." Eliza swallowed hard. "At first, I didn't care. I loved you. I thought we could make it through anything." She paused, then added, "But then she threatened me." The air left Kelvin's lungs. "Threatened you? How?" Eliza looked down, her hands curling into fists at her sides. "She said she'd ruin my family, my dad's company, our entire future. She made it clear if I didn't disappear, she'd destroy everything we had." Kelvin's eyes widened in disbelief. No, that can't be." "She did it, Kelvin," Eliza cut in, her voice breaking. "Days after I walked away, my father's business collapsed. Scandals, lawsuits, bankruptcy, just like she promised." Kelvin took a step back, stunned. "She made sure I had nothing," Eliza continued. "I lost my family, my home, everything. And then I found out I was pregnant." The words landed like a sledgehammer. Kelvin turned away, breath catching in his throat. His mind raced. He remembered the timing, how odd it had been that Eliza's father's empire fell overnight. He hadn't connected the dots. Until now. "I tried to survive," Eliza whispered behind him. "I worked every job I could. I raised him alone. And I never told him to hate you. I told him the truth." Kelvin couldn't breathe. Every truth he thought he knew was crumbling. His mother, Victoria Rowland, had orchestrated everything. She'd not only taken Eliza from him, but she'd erased an entire part of his life. A son, a family, gone without a trace because of power and control. "I believed the worst of you," he murmured, still facing away. "I let myself believe it because it was easier than questioning what didn't make sense." Eliza stood quietly behind him, her eyes filled with sorrow, but no satisfaction. "You weren't supposed to question anything," she said. "She knew you wouldn't. She counted on that." Kelvin turned back to her, his voice filled with regret. "I should have looked for you. I should have fought." "I know," Eliza replied softly. There was a long pause between them, heavy with memories and mischances. Finally, Kelvin broke the silence. "I want to see him again. Liam." Eliza's jaw tightened, protective instinct rising in her. "Why, Kelvin? To throw money at him? Buy your way in?" "No," he said quickly. "That's not what I want." "Then what do you want?" Her voice was steady but cold. Kelvin met her gaze, his own voice rough. "I want to earn a place in his life. If I still can." Eliza's expression shifted slightly. There was still hurt in her eyes, but also something else, uncertainty. "Don't hurt him," she warned. "He's already been through too much." "I won't," Kelvin promised. "I swear it." She stared at him for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "I'll tell him you want to meet." Kelvin exhaled, his chest tight with something unfamiliar, hope. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing a deal or a dollar. He was chasing redemption. Eliza stood in the doorway long after Kelvin left, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her heart was pounding, her thoughts tangled. Seeing him again had shaken everything. The pain, the fear, the love, all of it came rushing back the moment their eyes met. But it wasn't just about her anymore. It hadn't been for 8 years. It was about Liam. That night, after dinner, she sat on the worn-out couch in their small living room. Liam was at the table, coloring quietly under the flickering light bulb. Eliza watched him, his small shoulders hunched, his tongue peeking out in concentration. He looked so much like Kelvin had hurt. "Liam," she called gently. He looked up, pencil still in hand. Yeah, Mom. There's something we need to talk about. He set the pencil down and came over, sitting beside her. Is it about the man I saw today? He asked. The one in the suit. Eliza nodded slowly. Yes. He's my dad, isn't he? She hesitated, then nodded again. Yes, he is. Liam's face didn't change much, but his hands fidgeted in his lap. You told me he left. I told you what I knew, she said softly. I thought he didn't care, but now, I think he didn't know. Liam looked up, his voice small. Does he want to see me? Yes, but I need you to know something. She placed her hand over his. You don't have to do anything you don't want. If you're not ready, that's okay. Liam bit his lip. I don't know what I feel. Eliza pulled him into a hug. That's okay too. She stared out the window, knowing tomorrow would change everything. She just prayed Kelvin meant what he said, and wouldn't break their son's heart again. The next afternoon, Kelvin waited nervously outside a modest community library. Eliza had agreed to bring Liam there, to neutral ground. It felt surreal, the billionaire in a custom suit pacing anxiously next to a cracked bench under a dying tree. He had stood in billion-dollar boardrooms without flinching, but this made his palms sweat. When they arrived, Kelvin straightened immediately. Eliza gave a small nod, then stepped back, letting Liam walk forward alone. The boy stopped a few feet away, his backpack hanging off one shoulder. Hi, he said simply. Kelvin knelt to meet his height. Hi, Liam. They stared at each other for a beat. Then, Kelvin cleared his throat. I wasn't there. I didn't know. And I'm sorry. Liam didn't reply. Kelvin tried again. I know I can't make up for all the time I missed, but if you'd let me, I'd like to try. Liam shrugged. Mom said you didn't know, that you weren't a bad person. Kelvin's heart twisted. She was kinder than I deserved. Liam looked up, eyes uncertain. You're really my dad? Kelvin nodded. Yes, I am. Then why didn't you look for me? I thought your mom left me, Kelvin said, voice low. But I was wrong. I believed a lie, and I didn't fight for the truth. I failed you. Liam looked at him for a long moment, then said, I don't know if I can trust you yet. Kelvin nodded slowly. That's okay. I'll earn it. Behind them, Eliza watched in silence, her hand pressed against her chest. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was something. Days turned into weeks, and Kelvin showed up every chance he got. He didn't bring expensive gifts or grand promises. He brought time. He picked Liam up from school when Eliza was working late. He helped with homework, even when he didn't understand it. He sat through an entire school play and clapped the loudest when Liam appeared on stage for 5 seconds as a tree. At first, Liam barely spoke to him, but slowly his walls began to crack. He asked questions about Kelvin's job, his childhood, even about his favorite superhero, and Kelvin answered each one honestly, never trying to impress, just to connect. One afternoon, Eliza found them in the park. Liam was teaching Kelvin how to play a card game, laughing when he caught him cheating. Eliza stood in the distance, arms crossed, watching. She didn't say a word, but Kelvin saw her. He nodded gently, and for the first time, she gave him a real smile. Later that evening, Eliza walked Kelvin to his car. You're not the same man I remember, she said. Kelvin glanced at her. Is that a good thing? She hesitated, then said it might be. He looked away, the weight of everything still heavy. I can't change what happened, Eliza, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. She didn't respond immediately. The street lights flickered on, casting soft shadows around them. Then she said, quietly, Liam likes having you around. I just don't want him to get hurt. Kelvin met her gaze. Neither do I. For the first time in a long time, there was no tension, only the quiet truth of two people who had once loved and who were learning to trust again, not for themselves, but for someone much more important. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Liam sat cross-legged on the living room floor, organizing his drawing pencils. Kelvin was helping Eliza fix a loose cabinet door in the kitchen, clumsily holding a screwdriver. The air smelled like tomato soup, and the soft patter of rain tapped against the windows. Liam suddenly asked, "Dad, were you scared when you found out about me?" Kelvin paused, startled by the question. He stood slowly, wiped his hands on a dish towel, and walked into the living room. Eliza remained near the kitchen doorway, silently listening. Kelvin sat beside Liam. "Yes," he said honestly. "I was scared because I didn't know how to be a father. And I was scared because I didn't want to lose you before I ever got the chance to know you." Liam looked down at his hands. "I used to wish for a dad," he said quietly. "Like when other kids had someone at their soccer games or dads who helped with science fairs." Kelvin's throat tightened. "I wish I had been there." Liam nodded. "I don't know if I'm ready to call you Dad yet, but I like when you're around." Kelvin smiled gently. "You don't have to call me anything until you're ready. I'll still be here." Eliza blinked back tears from the hallway. She hadn't expected this. This version of Kelvin who didn't run, didn't hide behind money or pride. He was present, vulnerable, human. Later that night, as Liam fell asleep with his sketchbook on his chest, Eliza and Kelvin sat side by side on the couch. She turned to him and whispered, "You're doing more than I ever expected." Kelvin looked at her, his voice soft. "You both gave me a second chance. I'm not wasting it." A few months later, the apartment looked different. Brighter, warmer, not because of furniture or money, but because of the people inside it. That evening, the living room buzzed with excitement. It was Liam's 9th birthday. Eliza had baked a chocolate cake from scratch, and Liam had invited 3 friends from school. Balloons lined the ceiling. Streamers trailed from the corners. And in the middle of it all stood Kelvin, wearing a paper party hat, trying to blow up a balloon and failing miserably. Liam burst out laughing. "You're terrible at this." Kelvin grinned. "I run one of the largest investment firms in the country, but I can't beat a balloon? That hurts." The kids laughed. Even Eliza chuckled. After cake and games, Liam opened his presents. When he got to Kelvin's, he paused. The box was small, wrapped simply. Inside was a sketchbook with leather binding, and etched on the front were the words, "For my son, the artist." Liam stared at it, then looked up. His lips parted, but he said nothing, just got up, walked over, and hugged Kelvin tightly. Eliza watched the moment with her hand over her heart. It was the first time Liam had hugged him. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the apartment was quiet, Kelvin stood on the balcony with Eliza. The city lights stretched before them. "He called me Dad tonight," Kelvin said, almost in disbelief. Eliza smiled. "He meant it." Kelvin turned to her. "And you? Do you still mean it when you say you don't trust me?" She hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "No, I think I do." Their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. It wasn't a grand ending. It was better. It was real. Weeks after the party, life settled into a rhythm neither of them had expected, but all had come to cherish. Kelvin no longer lived in penthouse silence. Most nights, he found himself in Eliza's tiny kitchen, chopping vegetables badly while Liam showed him his latest comic sketches. One quiet Friday night, after Liam had gone to bed, Kelvin and Eliza sat on the couch sipping tea. The television hummed in the background, but neither of them paid attention. "Eliza!" Kelvin said softly, setting his mug down. She turned to him, sensing something different in his tone. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught. "I didn't come back for this," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple silver ring. "I came back for Liam for the truth. But along the way, I found something I never thought I'd have again you." Her eyes glistened. "I'm not asking because of guilt or time lost. I'm asking because I love you. Still. And more than ever." His voice was steady. "Will you marry me, Eliza?" She blinked, her lips parting in surprise. The weight of everything, the past, the pain, the healing, pressed on her chest. And then, slowly she smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Kelvin let out a long, shaking breath and pulled her into his arms. Outside, the city kept buzzing. But inside that small apartment, a family was no longer broken. They were whole. The wedding was small, just close friends, a few of Kelvin's trusted colleagues, and some neighbors Eliza had known for years. It took place in a quiet garden behind the community center, surrounded by blooming flowers and the scent of fresh rain from the night before. Liam stood proudly between them as the officiant read the vows. He wore a little gray suit and clutched a ring box with both hands, grinning nervously. When it came time for him to step forward, Kelvin knelt and smiled at him. "You ready, champ?" Liam nodded quickly, then handed the rings to the officiant. Eliza looked radiant in a simple white gown, her hair falling in soft waves. Kelvin couldn't take his eyes off her. As they exchanged vows, there wasn't a single dry eye in the garden, especially not when Liam was included. "I, Kelvin Rowland," he said, voice thick with emotion, "not only take Eliza as my wife, but promise to love, protect, and stand beside Liam, not just as his father, but as someone who will always fight for him." Eliza's eyes overflowed. Liam sniffled and leaned his head against her side. After the ceremony, there was music, laughter, and dancing beneath fairy lights. Liam twirled around with both his parents, giggling loudly as Kelvin spun him in the air. At one point, Eliza stepped away to take in the moment. Kelvin dancing clumsily with their son, both beaming with joy. A neighbor approached and said softly, "You can see it. He's found where he belongs." Eliza smiled. "So have we." Years later, the photograph still sat framed on the mantel, a snapshot of that garden day. Eliza in her white dress, Liam between them, and Kelvin's arms wrapped around them both, smiling. Whole, finally free from the shadows of betrayal and silence. Kelvin had sold his penthouse and moved into a quieter neighborhood where laughter replaced silence. He built a foundation in Liam's name to support single mothers and struggling families, his way of making sure no other child or woman would feel the loneliness Eliza and Liam once knew. He never missed a parent-teacher meeting again. He cheered too loudly at soccer games and proudly hung Liam's art in his office. And at home, he was just dad, learning how to braid hair for school plays, burning pancakes on Saturday mornings, and fixing leaky sinks with more confidence than skill. Eliza, once afraid to dream again, found peace in love that proved itself daily. Theirs was not a perfect story, but it was real, a story of mistakes, redemption, and the kind of love that didn't come with conditions. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Liam ride his bike down the street, Eliza rested her head on Kelvin's shoulder. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked. Kelvin smiled, his fingers laced with hers. "I didn't even know what here was. But now that I do, I'll never let it go." And as the sky turned gold and Liam's laughter echoed through the air, Kelvin Rowland knew he hadn't just rebuilt a family. He had found a future worth everything he'd ever lost. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.